Hello, my name is Brent Hargreaves. This video is the first of three in which I advance a hypothesis which seeks to explain why the civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean suffered great damage round about the year 1200 BC. This video is the short version. The longer ones will contain much more detail, much more supporting evidence. We shall focus solely on the Hittites and their disappearance. There were others who suddenly disappeared, but if this hypothesis is correct, we'll kill many birds with one stone. The Hittites were a people who lived in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, in the 2nd millennium BC. Their country was called Hatti, and over several centuries they expanded their modest kingdom into an empire to rival that of Egypt, with whom they coexisted. Their capital was a city called Hattusha, in central Anatolia, which was abruptly abandoned in 1200 BC after many centuries of occupation and development. Within its city walls were housing, temples, storerooms, and a palace. Like its rivals Egypt and the third regional player, Assyria, Hatti was a great empire. It occupied 1 million square kilometers. It lasted for many centuries. It had great architecture and literature, had written laws, and was rich in commerce and military might. How then can this civilization have collapsed so abruptly, so completely? Historians have advanced many possible explanations, such as earthquakes, volcanoes, tin shortages, climate change, drought, and most often cited military conflict with some mysterious outsiders called the Sea Peoples. None of the theories seeking to explain the disappearance of the Hittites and the wider scale Bronze Age collapse of which it was part have been satisfactory. Dr. Philip Norrie of the University of South Wales lists 15 possible causes and then adds a 16th, pandemic. I don't buy this, but he articulates the mystery very well. Quote, "The end of the Hittite Empire occurred 1200 BCE and was part of a much larger event, the end of the Bronze Age. The end of the Bronze Age was known as the catastrophe because it signalled the end of all the known empires in the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East, including the Hittite Empire, the Mycenaean kingdoms, and the Egyptian Empire in Syria and Canaan, but not the central Nile-based Egyptian Empire. It was followed by the ancient Dark Age, when all that was glorious about these lost empires, including not only their palaces and cities, but also their history, religions, writings, art, music, administration and organization, temples, libraries, political systems, and trade routes, were lost. This loss lasted many centuries until the emergence of the classical Greek, Assyrian, and Persian empires, and the Hebrews later." The new hypothesis being presented here is that this was a natural disaster, but not one of terrestrial origin. It was a solar storm of rare ferocity, which rained lethal radiation down on these unfortunate people over a period of hours or possibly days. We will be providing evidence of this hard, penetrating radiation written into the rocks of Hattusha, and in addition written into Hattusha's grain stores, which lay miraculously undisturbed for 3 millennia until their dramatic discovery in 1999. The legitimate question, if a solar storm was so very deadly, then why did it strike here and not elsewhere, deserves a reply. The response to this is that the Earth's geomagnetic field, which normally deflects dangerous solar cosmic rays, has recently been shown to have weak spots, and those weak spots shift in time. This map of the strength of Earth's protective shield shows a weakness in field strength in part of South America, an Achilles heel, so to speak, or perhaps another metaphor, a weak spot in our bulletproof vest. And this weakness is no subtle variation. At the blue point shown, our geomagnetic shield is 1/3 of that in the best protected places. To quantify this, field strength here is 20,000 nanoteslas, compared to the dark red areas with a happy 60,000. The dark blue weakness shown in this image has been dubbed the South Atlantic Magnetic Anomaly, and it is changing position at a rate of 200 kilometers a year. It may be, although there is at present no proof, that Hattusha had the misfortune to be sitting under a transient Anatolian magnetic anomaly when the sun got angry. The biggest solar storm to have struck the Earth in modern times was the Carrington event of 1859. This was in the early days of our ability to measure the Earth's magnetic field and its fluctuations. However, while the solar storm was progressing, and as astronomers observed the unquiet sun through their telescopes, a magnetometer at Kew in London recorded a sudden weakening in the geomagnetic field of 600 nanoteslas. This paper in the Journal of Space Weather and Space Climate reveals that a long-neglected set of observations from India at that time showed a sudden drop in that field of 1760 nanoteslas. Without wishing to labour the point here, our magnetic shield is more variable than we ever suspected and is liable to weaken, to compress, when the sun puts it under pressure. If this hypothesis gains traction among scholars, there will be attempts to identify the Hittites' key vulnerabilities. Those which come immediately to mind are death by radiation poisoning, birth rate falling to zero due to loss of male or female fertility, famine due to destruction of crops and food stores, perhaps even famine due to the destruction of pollinators. This is a brief introductory video. The next one will describe solar storms in a little more detail. However, even in this quick overview, it's worth noting that there exists a worldwide network of neutron monitoring stations, one of which sits in Antarctica. When an angry sun shoots solar cosmic rays in our direction, these stations record the arrival of neutrons which penetrate the magnetic shield in the atmosphere and then reach the Earth's surface. This happens roughly once a year. In fact, 72 of them have been logged since the 1940s, and they are called ground-level events. In ending this brief piece, we shall dare to make two predictions which will either refute the hypothesis or leave it standing. Firstly, if this catastrophe did in fact happen, it will have left a worldwide trace in the form of radionuclides in tree rings and also in ice cores. We do not yet have a complete record of these traces. It's estimated that only 16% of the record of the last 10,000 years has been built up. There are at present many blanks. The first prediction is that when tree rings or ice cores from 1200 BC are found and analysed, they will show a spike in the cosmogenic radionuclides carbon-14 and chlorine-36. Secondly, the hypothesized neutron storm will have struck from a specific direction, in which case the penetration into Hattusha's bedrock will have been directional, perhaps affecting the southwestern slopes and not the opposite side, which would be sheltered by the bulk of Hattusha's limestone mound. It's to be hoped that future researchers will look for an asymmetry in the chlorine-36 created in that rock by those neutrons. Given that the city of Megiddo was also destroyed at the end of the Bronze Age, I propose to dub this hypothesis by Megiddo's more familiar name, synonymous with catastrophe, the Armageddon Hypothesis. In weaving together the many strands of this mystery, I've been privileged to read the excellent work of a number of eminent scholars. Below is a list of some of them. I'm happy to recommend the viewer to follow the links and to read for themselves the original wording of this fine body of work in many disciplines.